Welcome, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're so glad to have you here for our workshop for the Society for Conservation Biology North America. This is one of our education workshops. And we'll see if my slides want to advance. Okay, so I'm just going to be going through a quick introduction before we get to the meat of today's workshop. We'll start off with an intro to SCBNA. We are a professional society that is dedicated to advancing the science and practice of conserving Earth's biological diversity. Our vision is that we envision a world with thriving biodiversity, ecosystems, and human connections. And our mission is to provide an environment that welcomes, supports, and empowers diverse students and professionals to contribute, advance, and apply conservation science. And those who are members of our society have access to professional development opportunities, research and publications, and biennial conferences. And so thank you to those of you who are already members of SCBNA. If you are not already a member, you can join by scanning the QR code that is there on your screen. Give that a second. All right. All right, as I mentioned, this is one of our conservation education workshops. And so these are hosted by the Education Committee of SCBNA. And so our mission for the Education Committee is to serve the interests of educators, students, and members who are interested in advancing conservation science and practice through the development of education resources and professional development opportunities. Um, we do this through a variety of activities, including technical skill building via workshops and online webinars, like what you're in today, career development opportunities via panel discussion with experts and mentoring events, and then also social and networking events. And so we have a committee of folks that work on this for SCBNA. I am the chair, and then we have many wonderful committee members who are listed here on the screen. And we could not do this work without all of those committee members. And so if this is something that you are passionate about, that interests you, if you want to be a part of this work, we would love to welcome you to our education committee. If you're interested in joining, you can email education@scbnorthamerica.org. So, one of the things that we're working on right now is that we're looking to crowdsource resources that are funding resources that are not US federal opportunities. And so I know a lot of folks are looking for options like this right now. And so if you have a listing that you think falls into this category that would be beneficial to share with folks, you can scan the QR code on the top to add a listing of a non-US federal opportunity for a funding resource. And you can view that list if you are looking for these opportunities by scanning the QR code on the bottom. And so these are opportunities for graduate and postdoc fellowships and assistantships, undergraduate research opportunities, student and professional internships, and also really any size grant opportunity, small, medium, or large. So please feel free to check that out or add listings yourself. So for this workshop series, each workshop focuses on incorporating practical resources into classroom curricula and or out of school time programs. And this includes opportunities for hands-on learning with our workshop facilitators. And so we'll be continuing to do more of these in early 2026. So please keep an eye out on our website for upcoming workshops. And we are also looking for folks who want to give a workshop. So we have a call right now for both requests, if there's a type of workshop that you'd really like to see that you think would be helpful and beneficial, or also if you have a workshop that you would like to share. We are looking for folks to conduct these workshops. And so you can um, submit those at the link on the screen here. And I'm sure if you didn't already, Bertie will pop that in the chat as well. Okay, so today we have a wonderful workshop prepared called Integrating Poetry and Conservation, a toolkit for educators. And we have two wonderful facilitators with us today, and I will do a quick introduction bio for both of them. So first we have Dr. Marjorie Wanham. Um, she is a Canadian marine biologist who studies and teaches at the University of Washington's Friday Harbor Laboratories on San Juan Island. Her biology research and teaching focus on marine invertebrate zoology and the ecological impacts of introduced non-native species in coastal systems, while her pedagogical research and her teaching practice focus on cultivating learner self-authorship through guided inquiry. And then we also have Joelle Cook, who is an American artist and writer who currently lives in San Diego, California. A military kid who grew up in different places around the country, Joelle graduated from the University of Washington with a BA in interdisciplinary visual arts and creative writing. When she's not writing or drawing, she likes reading comics, playing Dungeons and Dragons, making tea, and exploring the world with friends and family. So, thank you both so much for being with us today. And with that, I believe I am going to turn it over to you and stop my screen share.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for that warm welcome. We're going to switch the sharing, screen sharing over here. Just a second.
Awesome.
Oh, how's that look?
Yep, that looks great.
Super. All right. Welcome, everybody. We are so happy to have you here today to join us, spending some time playing really in a space where poetry and biology, conservation biology overlap. And my colleague Joelle is a biology curious writer and artist, and is currently an artist in residence here at Friday Harbor Labs. And I'm a poetry curious biologist. And together we are going to offer a suite of activities that will make up a toolkit for anyone who wants to bring poetry into conservation education. We're going to talk about why you might do that, how to do it, and then what next, how to carry some of these activities forward from this workshop. And I'm going to turn things over to Joelle to get us going with a few quick introductory posts onto some whiteboards.
Yeah. Bernie, can you pull up the whiteboard for us, please? Okay. So all right. So your first prompt is we're just going to break the ice a little bit. And if you could post a little sticky note on the whiteboard with your name, where you call home, and what kind of learners you are engaging your work with.
There, yeah. Oh, great. We're finding the sticky notes.
Yes. I love to see them pop up and multiply. Oh, lots of undergrads in here. The people who teach undergrads. Okay. Informal learning, K-12, all sorts of learners. So we've got a great diversity of educators in here. This is wonderful. And multiple different countries represented. That's just wonderful too.
Let's let this whiteboard keep getting populated. And then, Bernie, can you take us to the second one?
Yeah. Mm.
Go ahead, Joelle.
Yeah, so the second prompt is we'd like to hear what your favorite poems are. Or poets, or can be pieces of music, whatever you think constitutes a poem, because that is a very wide variety of media.
And Hughes, Gary Snyder, Bob
Oh,
Dylan.
Dylan. No favorites yet? That's okay. Langston Hughes. Hmm.
Mary Oliver and Pablo Neruda, lots of conservation related material there. Michelle Silverstein, it's a great one for kids from childhood.
Mhm. And for adults too.
And for adults, yeah. Let's let this one keep populating and go to the third one.
Yeah. Our third one is still poetry related. So we're talking about what comes to mind when you think of poetry. If there are any fears or anxieties, it can be a very loaded term sometimes. So, do you have any preconceptions when it comes to the term? Any barriers, any stereotypes that you think of?
Bernie, can you take us to tab 3?
I've noticed with mine that even if Bernie takes us to the next tab, it doesn't necessarily jump everyone. So I think we might have lost some of the cohesion there. But I think people are finding the tabs well enough on their own. I struggle to get students to see it as more than just a school assignment. That is very relatable. Even as a writer, sometimes I have a hard time writing poetry without someone being like, oh, you should write a poem. It's one of those things that doesn't always occur to me. Mm, Dedicating time to writing, that can also be hard. I'm in the middle of a novel right now, and I've set myself up with a rule that I can't play a board game in a day unless I write several pages of my novel, and that is getting me to dedicate time to it. So sometimes just finding tips and tricks to get yourself to sit down with it. But that is hard. That is a barrier. Oh, making poetry that is relevant to others. That is hard too. To use the words to get your lived experience across is the hardest bit of poetry. Restricted by format, being told what poetry is, don't know form. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of format and abstract. So that's a great place to start. And that's a very common thing that people struggle with. So if we can find ways around being scared of form. It's a really good way to pull people into poetry.
Right, that's going to be a great jumping off place. So I'm going to, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so for some additional sticky notes. And then we will have opportunities to contribute more of your poems and your thoughts about your poems as we move through the workshop onto a shared Google Drive sheet, and we'll be archiving both these whiteboards and the contributing sheet at the end of the workshop, so you'll have a chance to come back and look at some of these notes in more detail. People feel scary about writing poetry. Yes, it can be scary.
The good news is we're here to make it less scary, and we do have some forms for you to try out. So hopefully that helps put a dent in that.
Me too. All right, I'll go back to screen sharing to take us into that. This happened last time too, which is that after I stopped sharing, it disappeared. So I'm just going to pull it back up again. There we go. Okay, so we're going to draw on some of those myths or essentially barriers and stereotypes that you all introduced, and go through a quick myth busting list here, which is something that you can bring to your learners. And these are some of the preconceptions that people have about poetry. One is that it arises spontaneously without anyone having to think about it, and that's how you know a true poet. And that poems are always beautiful and they're always profound, and none of those are necessarily the case. Poems take work. They can deal with really ugly things, and they're in fact sometimes a really good way to explore more difficult issues, and they don't have to be profound. They can be very lighthearted. Another three common barriers are that the language has to be really flowery, which it can be, but it doesn't have to be. That poems have to rhyme, they do not, or that they have to be written following a formal structure. And the constraints of formal rhyming and structure can be really fun to play with, but they're absolutely not required. And today we're going to focus on writing in free verse, which has no stipulations around rhyming or formal structure. And we're just going to work on using everyday language. But we're going to sneak in some scientific language as well. Mm-hmm. And two other popular myths are that revising a poem somehow kills its inherent poetryness. Not the case. Revision is essential for good poems, like any kind of good writing. And you can find yourself working and working and working with multiple different versions of a poem until it comes out the way you want it. And also that analyzing poems suddenly somehow kills their beauty. And if you've ever dissected an organism and you like that kind of thing, you know that that just gives you a better appreciation for how the whole creature works. And I would say it's the same thing. Analyzing poems gives you a better understanding for how poems work, which then improves your own poetry writing. So if any of those myths arise among your learners, feel free to just dismiss them and tell them to jump in anyway. In terms of a rationale for why adding poetry to conservation, I could talk about this all day, but I won't. I'm just going to highlight a paper that would give you 6 reasons if you need a rationale in your institution or in your learning setting for connecting poetry to science or poetry to conservation biology. The paper listed at the bottom, which is also linked at the end of the resources, will give you 6 great reasons in terms of developing the field of conservation biology and our interdisciplinary and intercultural capacities, in terms of developing your individual learners and their capacity to sit with and appreciate and learn from experiences of awe and wonder on the one hand and dissonance on the other hand, how that can prompt metacognition and increased connection to self and to others and to the natural world, And then some of the ready partnerships that kind of emerge between conservation and poetry, in that both practices require looking really closely at details, but also looking at the big picture. So there is a rationale framework should you need to draw on that to justify your upcoming poetry activities. And now we're going to move into the how of poetry. So you're going to need a laptop or another device to access the text that we're going to share with you in the upcoming prompts. You'll get links to text files to work from. So set yourselves up with those. And I'll turn things over to Joelle to guide us through the first of these three prompts that we've selected these prompts for today because they none of them starts with a purely blank page. So you don't have to suddenly produce poetry. They all start with a text or an image that leads you into writing a poem in a much lower barrier, easier access kind of way. Joelle.
Yes. So our first experiment that we're going to perform in the spirit of poetry science collaboration is the idea of the found poem, which is you have a text. In this case, we're going to draw on scientific text, research papers and analysis and whatnot. And you go through that text and you read it, but you read it with the eye of looking for words that could be important or interesting or especially poignant, to take those and reconfigure them into a poem rather than a paper. Why do we do this? Because it's an easy way to start with something that you already have. You don't have to generate it, like Mar said. It's a little bit of a word search. You're looking through this science paper to find words that can be used outside of science, but still harken back to their scientific origins. And it also teaches people to read closely and really think about what they're reading and not just read to say, I read it, but read to say, okay, what does this mean and how can I reevaluate it in a different structure of poetry? So, for example, there are, real established poets who do this in the wild. And here is an example. This is Madhur Anand's Especially in a Time from a book, A New Index for Predicting Catastrophes. And in this situation, she has taken a scientific paper and gone through it line by line and found words right here and highlighted them out and pulled them from the text and then put them into the format of a poem. Um, and what she's left with looks like any other poem out there. But it also has this double meaning and like hidden side to it that it is hearkening back to this research. So it infuses your poem not just with like beautiful words, but also with context and a deeper meaning. Um, so you are going to make one of these, and we've selected some texts for you to pull from. What we're going to do is we're going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to give you a copy of the text. And we would like for you to read the text slowly and go through and highlight words that stand out to you, words that you think you could configure into a poem. Copy those words and then put them in line order, make them look like a poem, and then revise that, adjust, just kind of fiddle with it until you see a poem come out of it and well, you're happy with it or until the timer goes off because we do want to get through our other prompts. For this version of this prompt, just to start with, we're not going to reorder any words. We're just going to have them in the order that they're in. You can add punctuation, you can add capitalization, but keep the word order the same. And if you finish the poem in the breakout room that you've chosen, you can also jump over to the other breakout room. But focus on one for now. So, right. We also have some rules to go with that, in that they're not really rules. Don't worry about form. Don't worry about rhyme. Don't worry about meter. Don't worry about syllable counting. Don't get bogged down in those details. These are rough drafts. This is play. This is not you're going to have a perfect poem at the end of these 14 minutes. We're messing around. Have some fun with it. And then afterwards we're going to share. So if we could pull up those breakout rooms now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we just need it to advance, which it has stopped doing, to be able to see what the breakout rooms are.
Oh, there are cheetahs and there is macroinvertebrate monitoring. I can tell you.
Yeah. And Bernie, if you're there, could you create the two breakout rooms?
Yeah, so breakout rooms are created.
Right?
So folks can join. She does this number one. And what was the second one, Joelle?
Macroinvertebrate monitoring, I believe.
That one is number two.
Yeah.
So I will
So
be with
pick
the
a topic.
cheetahs, and Mar will be with the invertebrates.
So I'll just think.
Right. Thank you. So erasure poems, as Ezra was just mentioning, are amenable to any kind of poetry, but in particular are a great way to process emotions that might be bubbling up around grief or outrage, because it is so satisfying to cross out text that you don't like and let the poem emerge in this spatial way with what you do like. And it's again like it's a version of a found poem. You're responding to an existing text, which makes it easier. It can create a really dramatic looking poem, which has this interesting visual element to it, and it can feel really cathartic. And it teaches both the close reading and analysis that a found poem can teach, but also essentially a creative reinterpretation of a text. So here's an example of a blackout poem, Waikiki on the Brink by No Revilla, from the Waikiki Blackout Poetry Project. And it's based on an original source text from an article in the Honolulu Star Advertiser talking about rising sea levels invading Waikiki resorts. And what the poet has done is blacked out the words. I've just covered them with a dark gray highlighter here so that you can still see what they were saying, but has blacked out those words, leaving the ones to pop out on the page, and creating these fun juxtapositions like the Department of Dredging Sand. And it goes on from there. So we're going to try this. Again, we have two breakout room options to pop into. They're both news stories. One is a news story about Typhoon Halong, which is a typhoon that recently flooded a lot of communities in coastal Alaska. And the other is a news story about the EPA rollback. So if you're feeling a bit grim looking at these two sets of headlines, you should be. That's the goal here, is to tackle difficult material that we maybe that can either upset us or annoy us or irritate us, and it's a way to sort of channel some of that into the action of creating a poem. So it'll be the same setup where in your breakout room you choose which are the two breakouts you want, and within that room you'll get a link to the source text. You can copy that to your own local device and then start crossing out words or highlighting them black to get rid of them. For this time, we're just going to use black to remove the words, although there's lots of other ways to approach that. And again, if you finish one poem and you still are feeling inspired, feel free to try the other breakout room. So I will stop sharing. And Joelle, do you want to describe this activity?
Yes, I think this is a perfect one to have be a take-home homework assignment, because you can do it with almost anything you see. So this is the observe reflect poem, as we're calling it. And this entails you don't have a text to work off of, but you do have an image or a nature walk or a species that you're looking at. Um, it's just a free write. So you spend a certain amount of time free writing about what you're seeing and what you're feeling and what you're hearing from this object or species or life form that you're interacting with. It could be anything. And then you spend another amount of time reflecting on how that makes you feel. So the first half of the free write is a very literal, this is what it is. And the second half is using that literal to make metaphor, to make meaning, to connect to other ideas and use that as a segue into another topic of your choosing. So you have these two free written pieces, then you have like, I don't know, a paragraph of description and a paragraph of reflection. And from that text, then from your own text, you are pulling pieces, almost like a found poem or an erasure poem, but with a lot less rules, to make two stanzas. In our case, two stanzas, but it could be however long you wish. Um, and this is a good method because it gives you a place to start from, but it also gives you less structure than the found poems because you are working with your own text and you get to choose what kind of words you're pulling from, what that you're comfortable writing with. Um, and it also engages all of your senses and it gets you up close and personal with the things that you're learning about in a biological world. So it's right there with the sciences, with the observation, uh, getting close with the species and teaches the observation and then has you look at the difference between what you are observing and what you are thinking about the creature that might not actually be real. But is meaningful all the same. Poetry doesn't necessarily have to be real to have meaning. Um, and then, as Mar would like to note, it practices the poetic turn in the middle from that change from observation to inference, where you kind of have a spin or a twist, or you pull the poem into another topic. And turning one thing into another is always like the heart of the power of a poem. So, um, we were going to give you, examples, right? This is probably the most common type of nature poem out there. You see a poem about an organism, it's basically this kind of poem. They were looking at it, they described it, and then they brought in some other topic to connect with that to make a metaphor. Uh, they're everywhere. So, like I said, for this activity that is now a take-home activity, we would like you to choose an image, and we have a collection of images you can choose from, or you can go find your own. Take 4 minutes to write continuously about what you are seeing in that image, and then take another 4 minutes to look at that. But what do you feel? What do you remember? What are you thinking about? What does it connect to in your mind? What is it making you think of? Um, and then you have these two pieces of text and you pull from them to make your two stanzas and then edit and remix and play with. And then these are the images that we have chosen for you. They will be available on the website after this presentation is over. And you can pick one to work with, or you can pick one and then go to the next. And it's really up to you because this is a free write. This is us sending you off into the world to make poetry on your own and, keep doing the poetry thing. And they also have links to the sites from which we got these. So, like I mentioned before in one of the breakout rooms, Cornell Birds of the World has a page on basically every bird that's out there. And you can take found poems from that, and they have pictures, and you can make observation poems from that. Same with the Photo Arc. That is a collection of photos of almost every endangered species in the world. It's a massive project that grows every day. The Burke Herbarium, or any herbarium that's online, the Burke is just the one that I know of, also has pictures of basically every Pacific Northwest plant, which is great for observations if you can't get outside. And yeah, lots of resources to pull this sort of thing from.
Great. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh, I just went to the link. That's not at all what I meant to do. Hang on. Hang on. There we go. Okay, so we have just very, very quickly blitzed through 3 different prompts. using conservation biology examples to create a found poem from an existing text. In our case, we picked scientific texts. One was a piece of primary literature, and the other was a protocol, a monitoring protocol. And then we tried out erasure poems related to or based on conservation-related news stories, allowing us to erase parts that we didn't want. And in the process, particularly for the EPA rollback poems that were coming out into that shared document, to change the meaning of the text by selectively pulling out words and removing other ones, so that it moves from a self-congratulatory news story about EPA planning to a critique of that same planning. So that's a really great technique to engage slightly more advanced learners in really distorting or subverting the meaning of the original text. And then the third one that Joelle has just invited you to engage in after the workshop is a poem that, again, is really accessible to learners at all stages, to start by observing something really closely. And you can start with an image, or you could start with an object like a feather or a shell or a rock. And to start by describing exactly what you see, and then move on to what you think about it or what it makes you think of, which really mirrors a scientific inquiry process of distinguishing between what you see and what you interpret from it. So there's a lot of parallels there between doing conservation biology and then developing this kind of poem. In our last little while here, we'd like to just invite you to think for a moment about these three different prompts and consider how they might be adaptable to your learners. So the invitation is to pick one of these prompts for the moment, either a found poem or an erasure poem or an observe describe poem, and think about, for your learners, what kind of source text would you pick for a found poem or an erasure poem? What kind of an item would you use for an observe describe poem? And how might you want to adapt the prompt depending on the age of your learners or the situation in which you're doing your educating? So we'll just have 2 minutes to think about that and jot down some notes for yourself about how you would apply this to your people, and then we'll invite a couple of people to share their thoughts on that. So there's 2 minutes of silent writing. Up in the chat. Joel or Bernie, please feel free to let me know. But just to leave you with some resources if you want to pursue this in your world. First of all, there are easy modifications for each of the prompts that we just tried. For erasure poems, you can change the colors that you use to remove the unwanted text and create really different sort of emotional vibes with what you're presenting, and whether that's whiting out the background so that the words kind of float on the page, or adding color and drawings, or starting to use physical objects. This is from a nature center to build a more complex collage. For found poems, you can just riff off the source text, almost like an observe reflect poem. So Kimiko Han has done this in Toxic Flora, where the poems all start from New York Times Science articles, which she's listed at the back of the book, so you can check out the sources, kind of like Madhur Anand's poems written from her own scientific papers, but these ones are from science articles. And one other thing that can be fun to do with any group really is if you pre-cut out a whole lot of words, for example, from a field guide or something, and then you can provide them to people to move around spatially on a table or on the floor, kind of like magnetic poetry, but you can make your own. And then with observe reflect poems, you can use hard copy images or physical items. You can observe things outdoors. You can add in sequencing by going on a walk. You can build in multiple senses, and these are 3 additional resource books that we find helpful for really building on that kind of close observation. If you want some teaching tips, these articles will be available in the final folder shared by Bernie. There are a big picture paper on why do this at all, and why bring in poetry to conservation biology? How can that help learners and the field both to develop? The one at the bottom is more prompts and more resources, really hands-on, concrete. How do I do this? This is a list of collections and anthologies in English of conservation-related poems. There's a list of individual poems, also in English, and a list of science poetry projects that you can dig into further online. And then finally, there's the document from today's workshop where you should please feel free to keep populating with your poems as you move forward, as you try out any of these prompts, and or any reflections or comments or suggestions you have if you try them with your learners. Anything that you find that works really well that you would suggest that other people try. So we're almost at time here, and we would like to thank you very much. We'd be more than happy to have any follow-up conversations or Q&A. We can stick around for a little while if anyone has burning questions at the moment. And I'll hand things back to Stephanie and Bernie.
Mar and Joel, thank you both so much. That was absolutely fantastic. And we so appreciate you both sharing and really facilitating that for all of us. That was a lot of fun. And I'm just so inspired by all of the poems that everybody shared. So creative and such a neat way to engage with this content. So thank you both so much for sharing those tools with us. And thank you to all of our participants for being here, for being active participants, and for sharing your creativity with everyone who's here. And we hope that you're able to use this and take this back to your learners. So we would love to get your feedback on the workshop. Bernie will pop a link in the chat and send a follow-up for a post-event survey where you can share with us what you think and more about what you're looking for in future workshops. And again, just thank you all so much for being here, and we hope to see you again soon in future workshops.